Hello everyone, how are you? Hope you're having an awesome day wherever and whenever you're watching this. I'm your host Ayman Hassan and welcome back to another video here at Most Amazing Top 10. Okay, I love reading. I used to read a lot more when I was young. I don't know how. I feel like when you're 13 or 14 you could just finish a book a day. I was so fast and now I'm just like struggling to get through books. But anyway, I feel like my favorite genre is probably fantasy, contemporary and young adult. I used to read Fear Street horror books when I was young and loved them, but in terms of real scary books, that's just not my vibe. But it may be yours, so this is the top 10 scary books you should avoid reading at all costs. Starting us off at number 10 is The Exorcist. I would be doing an injustice if I didn't start with one of the scariest movies of all time. And why was it the scariest movie of all time? Because it was one of the scariest books of all time. Written by William Peter Blatty and published in 1971, the book takes place in Washington DC and follows demonically possessed 12-year-old Reagan McNeil, who is also the daughter of a very famous actress. The duo are in Georgetown whilst the mother is filming when Reagan becomes sick. Weird things start happening around the house, which her mother tries to find rational explanations for, and Reagan's condition intensifies and deteriorates. Nothing helps her until the mother gives in and turns to a priest for help. A pair of priests spend the whole book trying to exorcise the demon, and it was actually based off of a real case of possession William heard about in the 50s. I don't want to go into more detail and include spoilers because if you haven't read it, you definitely should. I feel like scary books scare you in a way that movies just can't. When I used to read them at home alone, I physically could not continue reading because I was scared. I was scared of reading. That is a real fear, people. Coming in at number 9 is Blindness. Written by Jose Saramago and published in 1995, the book follows an unnamed city or country that's been afflicted with an unexplainable epidemic of blindness. And since most people there go blind, a social and economic breakdown soon follows. The plot involves a group of unnamed characters, and the book is written in really long sentences, and there are no speech marks around the dialogue, so you're also like, wait, who's speaking right now? The first half of the book takes place in a dirty, overcrowded asylum where the group and countless other blind people have been quarantined. And the whole thing descends into anarchy basically. People are worried about the availability of food, necessities, no medicines are allowed inside, so even a small infection could end up deadly. Gangs start forming, they start raping women in exchange for giving them food. It just gets really, really bad. The only person in the land that doesn't get infected was the doctor's wife, and we follow how she has to try and help the group survive. At number 8 we have The Haunting of Hill House. It's not a horror if a haunted house isn't on this list, am I right? Written by Shirley Jackson and published in 1959, the book has been dubbed one of the best literary ghost stories in the 20th century. It went on to become 2 films, a play, and the basis of a Netflix series, so it's safe to say even in the 21st century we are getting a lot of inspiration from it. Shirley even drew the floor plans of the house and its outside before beginning the novel. The plot takes place in a mansion called Hill House and follows 4 main characters. An investigator of the supernatural, Eleanor, a shy girl, and a disabled mother, Theodora, and the mansion's heir, Luke. They all come to the house because of having experienced something paranormal or wanting to investigate the paranormal. The house itself has been the site of many deaths and suicides, and as their stay progresses, creepy things start happening, as they always do. The house itself seems sentient and angry, but the best part of the book is the narrator. We trust Eleanor from the start because she seems quite reliable and sweet, but as the book progresses she becomes more and more unreliable, she starts descending into madness, and then it gets confusing on whether the things happening in the house are really happening or she's just seeing things or hallucinating them. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Filling our number 7 slot is The Silence of the Lambs. I don't know how I could have made this list and not included Hannibal Lecter. Written by Thomas Harris and published in 1988, the book is actually a sequel about the forensic psychiatrist and cannibalistic serial killer Dr. Hannibal Lecter. First of all, has anyone seen the show Hannibal? I watched the first season. I could literally only watch 1 episode a day, not even binge it, because it was just too taxing watching such screwed up things happen for so long. I used to have to mentally prepare before watching it. But anyway, at this point Hannibal is already in jail, so the plot follows an FBI trainee called Clarice who is given the task of drawing up psychological profiles of serial killers starting with Hannibal. Well, that's what she's told, but her real mission that she doesn't know about is to try and get Hannibal's help identify identifying a new serial killer on the loose dubbed Buffalo Bill. The plot follows her periodically visiting Hannibal and probing him about the killer. He gives her cryptic clues in exchange for knowing about her disturbing childhood as an orphan. This book won 2 awards for Best Novel, and it's a literary gem. I haven't met anyone who hasn't heard of The Silence of the Lambs. Like, they won't even know what it is, but they would have heard of it for sure. Now at number 6 is Karin Comfort. Written by Dan Simmons and published in 1989, it won the Locust Poll Award for Best Horror Novel, the Bram Stoker Award, and the August Derleth Award for Best Novel. Stephen King even calls it one of the greatest horror novels of the 20th century, so based on that, I reckon it's a pretty good book. The book focuses on a fraction of humanity who has intense psychic powers called the Ability. These people can control someone from a distance, and I mean control them, like physically too, as in they could make someone commit murder if they really wanted to. Killing someone indirectly gives the Ability users energy and youth, so they're almost like pseudo-vampires. The book sets up the fact the abilities have been used throughout time, whether that's fake charisma of a world leader, everyday murders, or the Holocaust. Although it's split into many timelines, it mostly follows a group of immoral people in the 80s, some of which want to take over the world. Investigators pursue a series of murders and realize these people really need to be stopped. It's honestly brutal. They get together in one scene and talk about all the people they killed, including John Lennon, and then later on 2 of them end up fighting but use normal humans around them as soldiers to fight each other. It's screwed up, but isn't every book on this list? Coming in at number 5 is A Head Full of Ghosts. Written by Paul G. Tremblay and published in 2015, the book follows an American family that's troubled. The dad is unemployed, they barely have any money, and then things get even worse due to the mental illness of their 14-year-old daughter, Marjorie. The book is told from the perspective of Marjorie's 8-year-old sister, Mary, and it starts when Marjorie starts telling Mary macabre stories instead of innocent Dr. Seuss ones. Welcome to the real world, Mary. Anyway, the dad, who is a born-again Catholic, decides Marjorie doesn't have a mental illness, she's demonically possessed, 2 very different things, and so he gets the help of his priest to try and exorcise her. And let's just say Marjorie is not really telling the truth. I'll leave it at that. At number 4 is Let the Right One In. Written by John Lindqvist and published in English in 2008, the book is essentially a vampire story, but it's not like Twilight, before you guys just skip number 4. And for the record, I just like to say I read all the Twilight books, and the books were actually really good. Please do not base the series on Kristen Stewart's acting, thank you. But anyway, the plot follows a 12-year-old boy called Oscar, a vampire child called Eli, and its caretaker Hakan. The story takes place in Stockholm in the 80s and focuses on a plethora of disturbing things like pedophilia, self-mutilation, murder, bullying, genital mutilation, etc. Oscar becomes friends with Eli when it moves in next door, and he finds out Eli was turned into a vampire when they were a child and hence forever remains in a young body and mind. Hakan, Eli's caretaker, was a former teacher who got caught with child pornography, and as you can imagine, he's very much in love with Eli and goes out and kills people and gets blood for them in order to sustain them in exchange for money. Even though Hakan would do it for free if Eli would let them be physically intimate, but we all know that's not going to happen. The story goes on when Hakan gets caught on his last blood-procuring mission, and things just get worse and worse from there. Death, murder, acid throwing, blood drinking, the book has it all, and it was adapted into 2 feature films. Filling our number 3 slot is The House of Leaves, and this one is hard because half the people who've read it say it's a horror story, and the other half say it's a love story, and I mean there is horror in love and vice versa, so can it be both? But anyway, written by Mark Danielewski and published in 2000, the book itself is incredibly confusing. It has footnotes, and those footnotes have their own footnotes. Some pages just have a few words or a line of text. Some pages you have to rotate the book so you can actually read it. Some pages words are arranged in a way that mirror the story, but basically the format of the book is meant to make you feel claustrophobic. The plot has many narratives, but mostly follows a tattoo parlor employee called Johnny. Johnny's looking for a new apartment when his friend recommends a place in his building from a man who just died. When moving in, he finds an academic manuscript written by that man about a film called The Navidson Record. Except Johnny can't find any evidence of the film ever existing. The main plot focuses on the Navidson family story. The family come home from a trip one day and find that their house has expanded internally, but externally it looks exactly the same. There are more rooms, hallways upon hallways, and all of them are featureless and unlit, and there always just seems to be a low growl sound in the house. Characters start exploring the house and venture into the endless passageways, which ultimately leads to murder, insanity, and death. Now the second plot takes place in the footnotes, and it's about what's happening in Johnny's life, and it gets more and more unclear whether his obsession with the manuscript and consequent paranoia and delusions are because of madness, drug use, or the manuscript itself. The third and final mini plot are letters woven in from Johnny's mother, who's in a psychiatric hospital. Honestly, with this book you really end up doubting your own perception of the story and what's fact and what isn't, and honestly, what more can you want from a book? Especially a horror book. Now number 2 is It, written by Stephen King, which I'm sure you all already knew, and published in 1986. It is iconic. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the book since the movies are all out as well, and regardless of whether you've seen them or not, I feel like everyone knows what it's about. The story follows a group of kids that call themselves the Losers Club. The kids realize they all encountered the same shape-shifting entity which took the form of their biggest fears. They named the thing It because they had no idea what it was. It wasn't human, it was genderless, it was it. They figure out It is behind all the child murders happening in the town, and they try to stop the evil clown. There's even a bit where Pennywise itself is narrating and telling the reader where it came from. The book is split into 2 timelines taking place 30 years apart, so we see the club as kids in the first one, and then we see them return to Derry in the second one because there's been another slew of child murders. I can't even count the amount of times people have recommended it to me and told me it genuinely scared the living hell out of them, and I still refuse to read it. I'm just not gonna do it. That's not me. And finally, at number 1 is Rosemary's Baby, written by Era 11 and published in 1967. The book sold over 4 million copies, and that made it the best-selling horror novel of the 60s. The plot follows Rosemary Woodhouse and her struggling actor husband Guy, who recently move into an old Gothic apartment building. Despite being warned about the building's strange history involving murder and witchcraft, they move in anyway. And the couple are quickly welcomed by neighbors Minnie and Roman, who Rosemary gets a weird vibe from. Due to some freak accident blinding his theatrical rival, Guy gets a great role and agrees to try for their first kid. Hurrah! But not. But that night, Rosemary has a sexual dream involving an inhuman creature, and the next day she has claw scratches all over her boobs, on her crotch, basically everywhere. And then somehow she becomes pregnant, but then falls severely ill, losing more and more weight and craving raw meat. Everything goes tits up, and I can 100% say Guy is not the father. And that's it for today's video, guys. I'm quite interested in which books on this list you guys have read and what your thoughts were. Leave them in the comments below, and also give me some reading recommendations if you've got any. As always, I'm your host Eamon Hassan, and I'll see you next time. Bye!